Everyone? Everyone. Hello. So welcome to Tuesday. I've got in a slightly extended time for this meeting today, just so that we can get through a bit of discussion on OKRs. We may not need all the time, and so you may get some time back. We'll certainly finish on time. So this will be time boxed so that we have a little bit of time at the end to go through our kind of social chat as well. So if we need more time afterwards, we can have that, or we can go async, but we shall see how we go. So there's a few announcements in there. Please have a read through. And well, no, the only one I'm not going to have as read only is congratulations, Myra, on getting a bonus. Thank you for your help on these things. Yeah. Also, my Slack is still melting because there are so many emoji responses to that announcement. So that's awesome. Cool. So what I mostly want to focus on today is OKRs. If anyone has other things you want to discuss, please just add them in the agenda. We'll get to those. But firstly, about OKRs. So thanks for the feedback in the retro from the previous quarter. And thanks for the work you've already done to get us to this stage so far. So a few little things around OKRs before we dive into the discussion. OKRs won't be the only work we'll do in the quarter, but they are there to help us prioritize. So they're there for us to be able to make decisions. If something drops in, we actually know what we're having to prioritize that new piece of work against. Hopefully it gives you a bit of a way as well to, if people make requests of you, to be able to explain to them like what we have focused on working on, as well as sort of feeling like you don't have to do everything. So this is one way we hopefully be able to limit things a little bit. And generally with the OKRs, they are meant to be ambitious enough for like to cover a whole quarter. It doesn't have to be that a single key result covers a whole quarter, but the objective. So we can have different focuses of key result within a single objective. But the goal itself is we're generally aiming to hit 70%. If we consistently hit 100% on all of our OKRs, then we need to be a little bit more ambitious. If we're consistently below on that, then maybe we need to rein in ambitions just a little, or consider like, are we prioritizing carefully enough, or things like that. So generally as we go through, like if you're in your mind trying to work out what the right size is, have a think about something at 70%. So the main thing I wanted to cover today is a bit of a discussion around how we rank these things, which is we didn't do at all last quarter. So last quarter we were kind of at this stage and we had some ideas, and then we more or less just kind of went, okay, they look good, on we go. So two things we didn't do. One was discuss other options, and two was discuss the size of the things and were they clear enough for us to pick up for the next quarter. So those are kind of two things I want to focus on. But what I've done, let me share my screen. Cool. So what I've done with all the scoring is tried to put these together into what is our team view. So these categories, some of them were very deliberately opinions, because that's kind of the point at this stage. So this is a sort of view of here are our team opinions of things. So what I've done is for each of these categories, the top ranking idea is slightly darker green and also bolded number. And then the second and third option are slightly lighter green. There's one exception where we have 3 with the same score. So I've just picked the second, third and fourth. So what we can see here is quite interesting. as a kind of personal opinion across the whole team, the continuing with the Kubernetes migration ranks top. And then we have quite consistently high results on rollbacks and also on changelog, plus security backports. So there's a couple that really stand out, and then there are different, depending on how you look at different themes, then other ones jump up and down. So what I wanted to start off with is well, let's start off with this, with rollback, right? So I picked that one just because, as we haven't got Java in, I won't dive straight into Kubernetes, and also Scarbeck knowing you're not 100%. So we'll maybe loop back to that one. But for the rollbacks, is there anybody who feels either that this wouldn't be a great one to take for Q1? So specifically, like, do you feel we're ready? Like, not to say, do you believe we should do it ever or not? Yeah, so does anyone feel like from their scores that that would be risky or a bad idea, for example?
So I think we are generally ready, in a sense, like as in we can do it. I think the concern thus far has always been like, oh, we've never done it, so what if this, what if that? And
yeah,
I don't think there's a way we can sort of get rid of that unless we actually do it, or at least try to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. A really great point.
So how do we actually plan to roll back, like in a broad level? How is that going to work? So
the general idea is that there is a kind of go-no-go point, which is around post-deployment migration. So if we want to roll back prior to post-deployment migration, then it is allowed. If after the job, we need a way to figure out if we actually run post-deployment migration or not. But the idea is that we roll back code, but not database. So it's just one version, and there's no database migration involved. We have to figure out what we want to do with GitLab, but this is more or less the idea. So it's basically, we are kind of running the same situation with Canary. So we end up with the next database, so schema n+1 with code version n. So and then I stop talking. So the end goal is that we still roll forward, but in the meantime, we can roll back so that we go back to a stable system. That's the very high level view of it.
And I suppose one of the big things as well is going to be, we'll need some percentage of coordinate deployments completed as well. So this ties in. Would people feel comfortable having something along the lines of the objective being basically like, this isn't the wording, but something that basically says like, run a rollback, or something that kind of sets us up that near the end of the quarter, we run a rollback to kind of validate. And then that sort of gives us a quarter to do what we need to do on the coordinate deployments, answer these questions, like work out like how on earth would this work, kind of assuming that that will be a lot of the work. And then maybe sort of like it's actually sort of nearer the end of the quarter that we would actually even attempt to see a rollback happening.
Well, I think it makes sense. We may also be able to run it earlier. I mean, it really depends. Probably is just like a deployment without certain jobs being run. So it's kind of deploying again the old version without running migrations and things like that. So once we have an easier pipeline, so that the deployer is easier to handle because it doesn't have multi-environments and things like that, and we have more control over how we trigger it. I mean, we can start running this on staging, and we start running rollbacks on staging, so that every day we deploy, and then after the baking time, so we are ready on canary, roll back, and then we deploy again, something like that. So to give us confidence that it is actually working.
Okay, that sounds interesting. So we're saying that kind of our objective will be a lot of it will be around the actual working out of how we do this. Cool. Okay. Great. And that, so Rollbacks has, we believe it has most significant contribution towards site reliability, which is great. It's going to be a huge focus, continue to be a huge focus for the whole department. And then slightly lesser, like I guess more as we become comfortable with how it works, it will contribute to MTTP and also make release management easier. So nice. Does anyone want to add anything else to Rollbacks before we move on? No. Okay, great. So that one seems like an idea locked in, and we can work out the wording and the scoping of that one. Cool. So let's discuss the changelog, because I think that one is our top dog fooding effort. And it's also our top useful for the community, and it's in progress. So all good stuff. How much does this look like it's a full quarter worth of work, Jurek, from what you already, like what you know of it today? Like, I guess some of that might change.
I would imagine it's probably more leaning towards like half a quarter. So 1.5, maybe 2 months, depending on how it goes with this quarter. So my current goal is basically to get a API in some state functioning by this quarter, probably still behind the feature flag, but at least it will be there. And then roughly speaking, I would say the first month of the second quarter, we would spend testing it on our own projects, starting with release tools. I do suspect that once we roll it out to say GitLab, Gitly, etc., some additional feedback will come in. And then I would imagine the last part of the quarter be spent on polishing things up based on community feedback, rolling it actually out to all users, etc. And so I think, most of that will be spent basically testing, polishing, documenting, essentially everything that's not writing the actual code for it.
Cool. Okay. So dog fooding is going to be like, I mean, it's been a focus, I'm sure you've all noticed, for the last few months. Like we get asked about it quite frequently. It's going to become increasingly so. So would it make sense considering any of our other dog fooding items? So we have these 3 around like it as a kind of in addition, since this one maybe isn't a full quarter, so just to make it clear. We have 3 which rank quite high as dog fooding. They all rank reasonably low in terms of ones we believe we should do. So I don't know if anyone has any opinions on, is there a...
I do.
Yeah, go for it. An additional dog fooding.
Sorry, one of them is scheduled. So it will happen in the next 2 or 3 milestones, which is the environment variables at the group level. So I scored this kind of one everywhere because there's a PM that took it over and it should happen. So I think we should not focus on that. The other 2 are doing the same thing in different ways. I'm kind of leaning toward not using the feature flag. So the thing is, using feature flag, we are dog fooding, but we are not adding a new valuable feature with the product. And there is something that I don't like it is that depending on how we implement it, we may end up having feature flipping during a CI job run, which is not what happened with variables. With variables, we know that they are evaluated when the job starts, and then they are always the same for the duration. We can do the same thing with feature flags. We just dump all of them at the beginning and we convert them to variables, and then we do exactly the same thing. But it's kind of, yeah, I don't know.
That's interesting. I also know that the releases team are doing a lot of work on feature flags at the moment, which maybe introduces a little bit more risk. It also possibly means there's better features coming in the future. How would people feel about us having something a little bit more, I guess, almost like investigation? Because I think one of the things that we're coming up across a little bit at the moment is the constant decision of, do we build this in like release tools or add our own code, or is there a feature already? So how about we had something where a key result was either we pick like the next thing for dog fooding, or we, I don't know, like map some of our process, or just do something which is less about the actual writing code and more about getting a better pipeline of dog fooding things ready to go. Or as an alternative, like, because that one maybe is just something we could do without needing an OKR, I guess, is, I mean, we could do that separately. I guess one of the things that's in my mind is, it's been interesting as we've gone through the changelog work, particularly as we've been trying to work out the edit commit message feature. There's a bit of a blur about who does the work and who we need to get on board with the ideas. So it does seem that there's probably some upfront work we'll need to do for future dog fooding efforts. So we could maybe focus on that, like not necessarily as an OKR, and just, you know, make our kind of code efforts around finishing off changelogs and rollbacks plus other stuff.
We could use the terminology of like quality of life improvements for release management or something.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think CI labels is one of the ones that I feel like falls into that category, but is horribly useful for everyone else who searches CI pipelines a lot.
Yeah, that might be a good idea, actually. Like, again, I wasn't really sure where that whether that's in a backlog already, but it certainly doesn't seem like it's necessarily something that is controversial enough that, yeah, we wouldn't be able to work that out in a quarter. So yeah, that might be a good idea. How do people feel about actually having an addition? Like, does that feel like it's going to be too much? Because I mean, we have got unscheduled work coming in, like as in addition to this, right?
I was looking at this list from the perspective of the team strategy, the merge request that Marin is working on. And I am slightly concerned by timing, because this is going to be, we are talking about Q1 fiscal year 2022. Okay. So in the current shape of that merge request, we have several things that we want to ship by the end of Q2, and just namely complete Kubernetes migration of stateless services, and what it is, defining deployment SLO, and no, this is just these are the only two that we have for Q2. So which means that for doing this, we have this quarter and the next one. And then for Q3, we have rollback completed and working. And for Q4, we have stateful services migrated to Kubernetes plus converting for released workload to features, so for dogfooding effort. This seems a bit too much, because I mean it's 4 quarters, so it means that every quarter we need to ship we need to dogfood something, plus we have 2 quarters to going from not having rollback to having kind of stable and actually enjoyable rollback system, plus completing Kubernetes and defining deployments as LO, which is kind of, a lot of work, even in terms of understanding, measuring, and figuring out what we want to do. So this was kind of driving my scoring here. So trying to figure out, if at the department level, we want to do this, and this is the team strategy, we should try to not deviate too much from this, because it's really ambitious. I don't know what other thinks about it, but at least to me, it seems really ambitious.
Yes, I agree. I mean, particularly on rollbacks and Kubernetes, I think they're the ones the scoping is harder to flex on. For the dogfooding one, I think there'll be some things where product teams will come up with features that we want to adopt. There'll be other things which, or maybe be reasonably small, they wouldn't be a quarter. I wouldn't think it'll be 4 things as big as the changelog, because that would be pretty ambitious. But I think it'll be a case of us. I'm actually wondering whether the number may end up being higher, but they'll be a lot smaller. So we might need to just tweak on that a little bit. But I agree on the rollbacks. I mean, the other thing to contribute towards rollbacks is our current MTTP target is 12 hours. And it won't be lowered until we've been hitting that for 3 months, which actually we're getting very close quite frequently. But it will be that plus rollbacks. So actually we can't make much more impact on MTTP without having a rollback. So, okay, so what I'm hearing here is that we don't want to add anything more to dogfooding at this stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I second your idea of kind of having some kind of pre-work state because especially for the things that requires PMs, right? Because if we are adopting something, then it's just up to us. But when we are actually coding the feature ourselves, then it needs interaction with PMs and things like that. So it may take some work upfront. Otherwise, we just don't have time to.
Yeah, okay, that makes total sense. Like I fully intend to kind of kick off on that stuff and pull you in as needed. But yeah, I agree, like it doesn't have to, I think we can use it to set ourselves up for future quarters nicely. Okay, great. Okay, and then the other big one I think that makes worth discussing is security. Automating security. So they have so very high on release management, like top, in fact, impact for release management, and also top for engineering improvements. So I suppose two things. One is how does it feel if we just don't do this?
I think it is fine. I mean, we have been dealing with backdoor since forever. So waiting another 3 months or 6 months for this, it is completely fine.
In a very selfish way, this has more to do with improving the life of engineers and not about improving the life of release managers. So yeah, I mean, it's very selfish, but it has less weight in the things that I want to see done.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that I could certainly, having been through it recently, like I can definitely see the benefits like to having it, but I still think people remember the recent security process. So in a way, it's almost still it's a positive. We've made big impacts on this. I don't know how much additional work will add much more value onto that one. Okay. So
yeah, I want to second on this, because if we think about the effort we have to put in coding this versus the effort that actual engineers are putting in just producing the backport. So best case is just they run the SecPick tool, I remember, and it is done. I mean, it's just a matter of babysitting pipelines and things like that, but pipelines will still be there. So all the edge cases, or the fact that we want to, if I remember correctly, there's this idea of trying to cherry pick ahead of time so that we know if the merge request is still, say, compatible with the security branch or with the target branch, the backport branch, or not. So all these kind of things are super nice to have, but it's a lot of stuff built on top of our tooling system. It's a lot of code to manage, and it's just really how much time is it saving for the engineers involved into this? Because when you are working on a security fixes, usually this is your main goal, right? So you have, as an engineer, you have your top priority is working on that. You put all the attention on that fix, and it's kind of, yeah, it's a minor part of the process, the providing the backports. And it's a problem when the peak doesn't, when you can't peak it. But in that case, no tooling can help you. It's just up to you to figure out how to code that fix for the old version.
I do hear you. I'm not sure if I will agree with the minor part of the security release process, because for some reason, creating backports, even though if we have the cherry picking tooling, it is hard for developers. It is hard for them to find what stable version they need to target. It is also hard to have them approved by the maintainer and then assign them to the bot. I am not saying it is difficult itself, but I think it is tiresome because they have to do that 3 times. But yeah, I think it is fine not to do this quarter. I mean, we have been living like this since forever. We just wanted to make clear that it's also not that it's very easy for developers to actually create backports.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And actually, I think one other thing that makes me want to defer this actually is that if we are possibly saying that this might change at some point this year, and actually the number of releases we backport to theoretically could change, that might add or also remove the need to be automating these backports, right? If we're suddenly going back a lot more versions, maybe automating it is the wrong approach because we won't get so much benefit. So I'd quite like to see how that plays out a little bit before we decide what the correct solution is for this. If there are small things, though, that we can do to make it easier for people to find the right branches and know what they need to do, particularly like if they're trying to like create them ahead of us cutting the monthly release, like there's nothing to stop us doing that stuff, right? That's not an OKR sized piece of work. So we can still think about whether there's like smaller improvements we can do before we get to this work. Cool, okay. Great, and then, so the only other one which we have as a kind of big question mark is around observability for Kubernetes. So Skobek, I know you're not feeling 100%. So what I was going to briefly propose is I would like to see if we can think of a way to wrap this up into our main Kubernetes OKR, if that sounds like a vaguely reasonable idea.
It sounds reasonable. I think you and I could work on that async.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Like,
figure out what needs to happen. What I'm worried about is that we've got a few things that have come up in the last few weeks that I think are going to hold us back even further. The Kubernetes upgrade, and then this blocker that is whatever the thing is I pulled last week.
oh, the dependency,
Yeah,
the external dependencies. Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
It happened again this morning.
No, don't tell me that.
We're at the denial stage, Alessio. Cool. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Let's like, I actually think there's some great benefit in these not being separate, because there reaches a point where we go too far into the migration and we're not comfortable with the observability. So let's tie those together into a single OKR.
Yeah, I agree. And plus, it also came up as a corrective action that we're missing some monitoring in certain places that should have been in place beforehand. So I think that's our sign of a slap on the wrist kind of situation.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do that one async, and then we can always use some time in the demo on Thursday to debate if we need to. Cool. Okay, so the only other one I had as a question mark then was this SLO one. Now we do need to reach an SLO. It probably has very minimal value for now. So the goal behind this SLO is to separate out the different kind of stages of our pipelines, and we don't all equally share responsibility for these things, right? So we'll be able to use this to identify, like, is it something that delivery needs to focus on, or actually do we need to be spending way more time with quality or development or whatever, whoever it is, to help move things forwards. So I think probably the way I'm seeing this is the first bit is just literally work out what we need to do for that. The second bit then is like, probably there'll be some gathering of data and analyzing things. And then after that, it will be potentially some work. I'm going to propose we possibly don't have this as an OKR, unless people feel strongly. And my reason for saying that is purely because we already have 3. If we're saying that we'll do something with rollbacks, something with the dog fooding and changelogs, and Kubernetes, which already feels like quite a lot given there's only 7 of us. If we do have one, I'll ask Marin if he agrees with that. If we do have one, it will be incredibly lightweight, and I'll focus on doing the bulk of the work so that it's not for everyone in the team. So unless people strongly want to particularly define an OKR around SLOs, I'd say for Q1, let's maybe use the quarter to define that. Excellent. Is there anything else people want to either highlight or throw in another idea or challenge anything around this?
I want to challenge the completion of the Kubernetes work. I feel like Pages is holding us up right now. And sure, we still have the web and API, but I think Sidekick is still going to be held back. Maybe being able to complete the web and API gets us that 70% marker. I just question whether or not we should continue to say we will complete stateless services into Kubernetes because of the Pages holdup.
Yes, that's a really good point. Yeah, and especially, I suppose, if we bring in more observability. So if we did send web and API, would that feel like a ambitious target?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as if it's just a language change, then I have nothing to compete here. It was just more of a question of logistics, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's a really great point. Yeah, and I think for all of them, it's going to be, all of these OKRs, it's going to be scoping these correctly. But yeah, I agree. Let's frame this as, let's start with web and API, put in the observability things, and then see. We may still need to refine it down a little, based off this last quarter.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I have a question,
Yes.
Skarbek. Why did you say that Pages is part of the stateless services?
Sidekick is stateless. Well, it's supposed to be stateless.
Yeah.
Everything is supposed to be using object storage, but Pages is the feature that is not doing so currently. That's the part that's the work in progress.
Okay, so it's talking about Sidekick, because we have the special Sidekick. Okay, I was thinking that migrating Pages to Kubernetes was part of migrating stateless services. I was ready to argue that it's not stateless at all because it has websites on it.
That'll be our next OKR for the stateful services.
Okay, cool. Great. Yes. Okay, what I think I will do is pop these ideas down and we can async. I'll put it down as a suggestion for scope, and then we can async work out like what the right size is for these things. Is there anything else people want to mention before we get there? No, perfect. Okay, great. Thanks so much for all your input in this. Hopefully we're going to end up with very useful and motivational OKRs. So rough timeline for this stuff is this week is really about agreeing on the ideas. So what I'll do is after this meeting, I'll just jot down in that OKR issue and ping you all like the ideas we've got, and then we can think about them for like a day or two, scope them down a bit, get some input from Maren, and then by the end of this week, be fairly happy that we roughly know like what we're going to try and achieve. And then we have next week to actually do the wording and try and work out what are the right key results, and also any updates on working epics. Cool. Thanks so much for all your input on that. Is there anything else people want to discuss today?